All right, thank you everyone for coming. It is our pleasure to welcome back Dr. Gerald Schroeder, world-renowned physicist who's spoken at the yeshiva 2 times last year. The guys thoroughly enjoyed him. He always asks me how long he has until, and every time I tell him about an hour, and it's never an hour, it's usually more because people have lots of questions. Hopefully, as long as you can stay, it'd be great, but we clearly understand that you're bound by time. But without further ado, Dr. Gerald Schroeder.
Well, thanks for having me. See, there's a whole range of topics. The whole idea is to see, of course, you all know this idea of whether it's confluence or conflict between Torah and Teva, right? Whether they can match or whether they disagree. The key with my work, at least, is that when I'm trying to understand Torah, I only use ancient commentary. No modern commentary, because all modern commentators are always bending the Bible to match the science, or mending the science to match the problem. Part of the problem, of course, is that they've heard about things like this. I don't know if you have this, but just stuck in there. These are my socks. They're washed. But ain't something my wife got me these socks. But inside the socks is a mi'uban. A mi'uban, eben means what? Stone. So here the word eben into mi'uban. Inside mi'uban is the word eben, something that wasn't a stone but became a stone. It's a Hebrew word for fossil. Like petrified is, I guess, Latin. This is Hebrew. And this mi'uban, Barbara got it from me in Montana, from the States in the northwest of the U.S. There are so many dead dinosaurs that the state actually sells them. So this mi'uban is about 150 million years old. It's the vertebra, the backbone of a plesiosaurus, a water-dwelling dinosaur. It comes from Montana. Barbara actually wanted, well, my wife's Barbara Sofa, great writer. She looked her up in the bsofa.com. In any event, we're married, but she calls herself Sofa. She won't admit it. In any event, she wanted to get the whole dinosaur. Didn't fit in the suitcase. So I got part of the backbone. So if you want to own your own dinosaur, parts thereof, head out to Montana. Usually they're not allowed to be sold because there are treasures, but there's so many. You must have the dinosaur jamboree or something when they died because the state sells them. Anyway. So, I mean, there would be an example of having to bend the Bible to match the science. A 150 million year old rock, dated by 2 radioactive decay chains. Never say carbon-14, that always tells you you're off your turf. Okay, there are lots of radioactive clocks. Carbon-14 is relevant to about 0.1% of the entire fossil record. It has almost no relevance whatsoever. This is very recent. Fossils. Otherwise, there are many other radioactive clocks that are metal. So here you got dinosaurs and a calendar that doesn't even reach 6,000 years. So we may have touched this before, but that's something I usually talk about. How many of you here have ever attended a talk when I've given about how the age of the universe can be young and old simultaneously? Not ke'ilu, not as if, but how many of you guys or gals? Okay, so just a few. Don't be embarrassed to raise it because you heard it. I don't want to just go over the same thing again. No? How many of you have, okay, here it is. How many of you have heard it? How many of you have not heard it? Oh, okay. Everyone had to raise their hand at that point. Okay, great. Anyway, but before getting to that, I would like to spend just a couple of minutes on evolution, okay? Because the age of the universe and evolution are 2 of the pretty major topics of science and Torah which seem to conflict, where they don't really have to conflict. So, anyone here know the definition of evolution? Not what it does, but how it does it? Anyone? It's a 2-stage process. Yeah.
Sorry, can you? I don't fully understand what you.
I would like to know how evolution works. What a practicing biologist would say of the processes of evolution. I can say that because I'm not a practicing biologist, but over the last 6 months, we've had 4 persons who make their living as biologists. You know,
Do you mean like natural selection? Or
well,
like
I
gene
mean,
mutation?
what are the processes? Natural selection would be one of the processes, but there's more than just that. Because you have to get to the point of where you can select. That is to say, everything can't be the same or there's no selection. So what gets you to the point
Like
where
mutation?
some lions are stronger and some weaker? What?
Like mutation?
Mutations. Yeah. So the two stages. Here's what all four said, and they were spread over about a month's time, going back about 5 or 6 months ago. Over this month, they didn't overlap in the same session, but it was very nice having four of them. And every one of them said exactly this, exactly, almost like word for word, because they make it in the textbooks. Random mutations in the sex line make changes in the progeny, because they carry forth to the progeny, and in the genes of the sex, mutations in the genes of the sex line make changes in the processes in the progeny, and then some lions have grown stronger and some longer weaker. That's the first stage. Random mutations lay the basis for the genetic change, and then the second stage is 100% not random. Strong lions eat weak lions. That's what makes why there are not a lot of lions in the world. Not because they're hunters. Lions kill lions. And so it's not random that the strong lions kill the weak lions. And it's not random that the fast cheetah get more food than the slow cheetah. And so the fast cheetah get more food so their progeny survive. And the slow cheetah get less so they have a harder life. The problem with evolution has nothing to do with the second process. Everyone holds by the fact that strong lions eat weak lions. The problem with the term evolution is the first word, is the first stage. And all said the following: random mutations lead to the changes. The problem with that definition is the word random. There are zero data, and I've discussed this with the big names that you know. They always back down with this corner. Show me that the mutations are random. Well, it was a cosmic. No, there are no data that support that the mutations are random. That the mutations happen for sure. Changes happen. The Torah gives us 6 sentences for the development of animal life. It starts in Genesis chapter 1, verse 20, with explosion of animal life in the waters. Science confirms that. It says, in English, it says that the waters teem with gleams of living creatures. And it's interesting because the Torah goes out on a limb and says it's not gradual, it's an explosion of life. The first mention of animal life is an explosion of life. The waters teem with teams of living creatures. Science calls it the Cambrian explosion of life. It starts in the waters. So I've got a picture down here, some of my notes. I didn't think I'd say this, but I'll just leave it out. Science tells us exactly. The life explodes, it's in the waters, and it's not gradual. It happens about 500 million years ago. Darwin knew about it also. He mentioned some of it in his the conundrum, the problem that makes for the science, but leave the problem of the science out. The fact is that life starts in the waters. The Torah tells us life starts in the waters, verse 20, as an explosion of life, then moves to the land, then becomes mammal, then becomes people. That's all the Torah says about it. It gives us 6 sentences from the creation, first mention of animal life, to Adam. So there's almost no information, but the flow is exactly what the fossil record says. Animal life starts in the waters, moves forward, becomes mammal, becomes human. That's what the Bible says. That's what the fossil record says. The fossil record says it in millions or hundreds of thousands of samples. The Torah gives us 6 sentences. The question is, what made the flow happen? Was it random, or was it directed, or was it a mix of both? But when a scientist will tell you that it's random, you should understand, if you're taking biology, I would not put your professor in the corner because you might lose your degree. Okay? If you've already got your degree, then you can put him in the corner and say, show me that the mutations are random. And the answer will be, we can't. Well, but look, why would we think? Why wouldn't you think? So the proper word isn't evolution. The proper word is development. That life developed from the simple to the complex is a given. For the Torah, for the fossil record. But the word development is neutral. The word development just tells us that the flow took place, but it doesn't say what drove the flow. And the problem is, I say this every time I give the talk, sometimes there will be a person, I will be a lawyer that is in the audience, a really sharp cookie, or knows of one who will take it to the courts in the States. In Israel, it's a different story. At the federal level in the United States of America, it is forbidden to teach science. It's forbidden to teach theology in science classes in schools that get public funding. Private schools can teach what they want. but it's forbidden at the federal level in the United States of America to teach theology in a science class. And the word evolution is a theological statement. Because when you say the mutations are random, what are you saying about divinity? Present or not present?
Not present.
Which is, so it's a theological statement. It's a negative theological statement, which is a stronger statement to say it's all God. Someday there'll be a clever lawyer that hears this blab. It has to be clever because you can get the opposition can easily trick a person into saying things he doesn't want to say. The fact is, the word development is neutral. Yes, God or no God, it doesn't make a statement. But the word evolution is a theological statement. In theory, in the States, it should be forbidden in science classrooms. In Israel, you know, I have no idea what the situation. I mean, I live in Israel, but I don't really know what the laws are here. In any event, so the next time if you have someone telling you about evolution, you can ask them to define, please define it. If they just say mutation, do this, this, and that, and then strong lines eat weak lines, that's fine. But if you ask them what the source of the mutations are, if they say it's random, then they're off base. Because not that it's a theological statement, it is the randomness. But there are no data that support the randomness. The data are there. So I'd like to give two examples in the press that show, that deal with this idea of how the information is presented, which biases the understanding and just reinforces this idea of randomness. I don't know, did I show this, the guys that were here, we talked about this once before? How many of you had not seen this? Most? Yes, I want to do this again because it's pretty crucial about the this is called the humanity switch. And it's talking about the mutations that changed a chimp-like skull to a human skull. There are transitional forms, and here's photographs of transition. So to say there are no transitional forms is just not true. There are, and here they are right here. Chimp skull, low forehead, not much place for a, the cortex, and then human type skull. So what makes the changes? Well, first of all, this is completely off the subject, but it is interesting to call this the humanity switch because everything in your life takes place between here and here. Everything. Your entire conception of the world is from here to here. So in fact, showing it as the skull as the humanity switch, it's a good example, as an example of what takes place up here and what might seem elsewhere. If you all will please move your toes, wiggle your toes. Your toes I can see, they're moving. Where do you feel your toes? Where do you feel your toes? In your head. Toes feel nothing. Toes are up. The nerves are in the toes, but they send the information to the head. It's hard to believe that even as I wiggle my toes, I'm sure I'm feeling my shoes. But they're not. Toes feel absolutely nothing. That's why painkillers work, because they stop the information getting to your brain. You have 6 maps of your body in your brain, all upside down and backwards, and because of the way the lenses and the eye is. And every piece of life you have takes place in here. But more than that, and this is really off topic, I think it's philosophically interesting. The universe is pitch black and silent. There is no light as we perceive light in the universe. And there's no sound. The famous statement, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there, does it make any noise? Let the whole gang be there and it still doesn't make any noise. There are waves of radiation out here. We call them light waves. But they're not light. If they were light, then this hunk of air would be glowing. And it's obviously not glowing. The only place that you perceive light is somewhere between here and here. And that's a problem, because any neurologist will tell you, there's no light in your brain either. Your brain is also pitch black. There's no light as we perceive light. There's no light anywhere in the material universe. Anywhere. These light waves that we call them are not light. They're radiation. That when they happen to hit your eye, they make some chemical reactions, and you get it somewhere back here. Something happens, and you perceive light. But there's no light. Sound is exactly the same. If sound were out here, then this air would be booming. And it's not. Your molecules bouncing. You go like this, and molecules bounce, and they go this way and that way, and all the other, and we hear the bump. Only after the molecules bounce into your eardrum and move a set of bones in the inner eardrum, move a bunch of hairs, and the hairs have nerves at the bottom. A phenomenal system. And the bioelectrical signal goes to the auditory part of your brain, whether it's here or over here, and you perceive sound. But there's no sound in the universe, and there's no sound in your brain. There's no sound anywhere in the entire physical universe. But we live with a massive sound and a massive vision. So where is it? Yeah, I don't know. Except it might be something called the mind, which might be separate from the brain. It's dualistic idea. It's been discussed a lot since Descartes. But so it's just a little. It's off topic entirely, but it's worth, I think, at least from my point of view, to consider. So what is this? What does the humanity switch show here? What the humanity switch shows is a development of life from the simple to the complex. And back here, there's a gene. The gene already exists. Then there's a common ancestor. The chips go off in this direction. We're going this way. And this happens about 5 million years ago. It's 6 zeros, right? And then this gene does something amazing. It duplicates itself. And then there's another common ancestor, the Australo, something other. And that's about 2.5 million years ago. And then, so most surprisingly, this same gene that was waiting in the wings all the time duplicates itself again. I get a bunch of copies and you end up with people. And those are the data that this article presents. It's the New Scientist. It's not peer-reviewed. That's important. It's not peer-reviewed, but it's quoting a peer-reviewed article about these data. And those are all the data that it presents. Information was present, a gene, you get a common ancestor going off, gene duplicates itself, you get another common ancestor going off, duplicates itself again, and you get a human skull. So those are the data that are presented. Here's the summary of the data. The summary, I just was on a separate page, so I had to cut it out and stick it on. The essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of random mutations, every one of them happening by chance. This is the summary of what I just said before. But it's not the summary of what I said. It's a completely prejudicial statement. The essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of random mutations, every one of them happening by chance. That's what the article said. No. The article said the following. The essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of mutations. Nothing about random, nothing about by chance. So why does the editor of this non-peer-reviewed journal change the data to say that they were random? Because there's a process, there's a goal here to reinforce the idea of randomness and chance in the world as opposed to a possible play of the divine. So I think it's crucial to understand that as information is presented, it's often skewed. New York Times, 4 columns wide, Tibetans cited as recent case of evolutionary change. Okay, how many of you saw this last year? This last year? A couple of guys. How many did not see it? If I've done it for most of the persons, so most haven't seen this. Okay, so apologize for you guys that have. What can I tell you? But I think evolution and age are such basic questions that it's worth boring people. Did you get that almost right? More or less, yeah. Tibetans cited as recent case of evolutionary change, New York Times, page 2, 4 columns wide. It's hot news. Evolution has been proven, and you dummies that don't think it exists, well, you should just read the New York Times, which is not peer-reviewed, you can guarantee. But it's quoting the journal Science. Science is one of the 2 leading peer-reviewed journals in the world. It's published in the States. In the UK, is the journal Nature. What the study is about, the fact that Tibetans living at 14,000 feet have no trouble whatsoever. There's almost no air up there. They're just chugging along, having a great time. So they wanted to figure out how this could possibly be. So a bunch of scientists, probably huffing and puffing, got up to 14,000 feet, which is like 4,000 meters, and when there's not much air left at that height. And they discovered, by taking large blood samples, that it wasn't that the blood had more hemoglobin, the more red stuff that catches the oxygen. The hemoglobin had a mutation. And that mutation made the hemoglobin essentially proactive. If an oxygen molecule happened to walk by, it grabbed it. So it was so active that although the oxygen was a low concentration, it was possible, to survive up there because their blood hemoglobin was special for the height, for the altitude. Now, the nature of the Tibetans is they're not really Tibetans. they're really Han Chinese. That's why China wants to took over Tibet. I mean, it's obviously a political ploy. I mean, but they've been Tibetan, Han Chinese Tibetans for 3,000 years. You know, it's like saying, I don't know, the Americans, the United States are Saxons or something, or I don't know what they would be actually. But in any event, about 3,000 years ago, a bunch of Han Chinese moved from the Beijing area where they are till today up to the mountains. Who knows why? Mosquitoes, war, whatever. You know, must have been pretty tough and muggy down in Beijing, so they figured the mountains are fresh air. In any event, so to get a background study, in order to get published in Science, you have to do a comparison. It's lovely they got, you know, a lot of this gene up there in the mountains. What about down at sea level? Down at sea level, the study of Han Chinese at sea level, Beijing, they discovered the mutation also, 9% abundant. Up in the mountain, it was 87% abundant, 9% at sea level. Now, why isn't it 87 or 90% at sea level? Because it kills you, so you don't want it. But it kills you after your early childbearing ages. So you can get it a couple of kids and then you drop dead, okay? But if you're up in the mountain without it, you know, you probably drop dead before you get to a couple of kids. So we wanted to figure out what happened here, and if you look at what happened, it's very interesting. This gene has enough passive mutations in it to show that it existed tens of thousands of years ago, perhaps even longer, but way before the 3,000-year migration. So the gene was already present. The gene was already present in the population 3,000 years ago among the Han Chinese. And then 3,000 years ago, let's say, so it's 9% abundant at sea level. So if it's 9% abundant, that means over 100 families go up, 9 families have it, 91 don't. They get to the top of the mountain, the 9 families that have it, they're just moving right along. But the 91 that don't can barely, you know, hold themselves together. So obviously the families that have the gene will flourish, and the families that don't won't flourish. So over time, the 9%, which they go up there, those 9 families become more and more dominant, and you get after a few thousand years 87% domination, and the other one becomes diminutive. Because what happens is at sea level, what you don't want, it's like this, the ones that don't have it is this percentage, the ones that have the gene have this. That's exactly what you don't want. But then the climate changes. That is to say, they go up to the mountains, so it's all changed. So now suddenly, where you want this becomes dominant, and that becomes diminutive. So that's what happened. Is that evolution? Tibet is cited as a case of evolutionary change. What's the first stage of evolution? Within the time frame of the experiment. But just in general, how do you define evolution? The first stage is what? Mutations make the changes. In this time period of 3,000 years, there was no mutation. The mutation, that gene has been present for tens of thousands of years. It's not evolution at all. It's adaptation. There's a diminutive, subservient gene that wasn't good for the environment at sea level, and then it becomes dominant. And the one that was good at sea level becomes diminutive. That's called adaptation. So now you go back to the core article in Science, and the word evolution appears nowhere. Because you couldn't get away with that in a peer-reviewed journal. The word adaptation appears there. That's the difference between the two. So why would the New York Times lie to us and say that it was evolution when they know it's not evolution, because in the article it talks about adaptation? So why would they lie to the average bloke on the street to say it's evolution? You know why? Because it sells newspapers. That's why. And newspapers are in the business of selling newspapers. The New York Times is no different. That it might have to lie and change the truth to give a lie. That's, that's your own business. That's why, that's just the way it is. Because the more people that read the news, adaptation, no one is interested in reading about adaptation. Everyone's interested in reading about evolution. Adaptation doesn't sell newspapers. Evolution does. So, you have to be careful when you get the information when it's foisted upon you that you're hearing something that is actually telling you what has happened as opposed to what people would like to happen. Yes?
Is there any theory or explanation why that gene existed before people went up to?
I don't know, but I don't know, but there are many interesting genes that exist. For instance, the same gene, it's as if the life could have been front-end loaded. I'm not saying it was, but life could easily be front-end loaded. If you think, look, the universe comes to being as a burst of energy. Forget string theory and all these things. In essence, you're talking about electromagnetic radiation. Electromagnetic radiation is the same stuff that carries the information to your cell phone, or to a whatever it is. If you have a television, or a television. In a cell phone, we can pack up such electronics in something this big. You know that in fact there are more connections in some of these than you have in your brain. Actually, not in the cell phone, but in big computers. And humans can imprint on that wave of radiation, music, sound, numbers. You know, I mean, God could, you know, since the universe starts with radiation, a lot of it could have, I'm not saying it was, okay? But as my brother-in-law, Gil Goler, one of the 5 leading lawyers, and he retired now, in Israel, said, he just mentioned this idea, and he didn't say it was true or false, but it's interesting. We as humans can imprint so much information on a wavelength. I mean, that's exactly what's coming to your cell phone. You can see the pictures of your kids, you can hear them talking, you get movies, and it's in this piece of electronics. That if God wanted to front-end load the radiation, there'd be very little trouble doing it, you know, because if we can get in a wave this much information, I'm sure the Creator could get a lot more information in this. I'm not saying that's the case, but there's a lot of stuff that is front-end loaded. Might mean it has to have existed before it was needed. One of the examples is the gene that turns on an eye in your eye. If all mammals have pretty much the same gene, it's called the iris. If you take a snippet of that gene and go to an insect, like the fruit flies, which usually work with, and you implant that gene anywhere on the fruit fly that's wing, for an example, it will develop a fruit fly eye at where you put that gene. The iris gene is a trigger to turn on the information that your cell already has, make an eye. That gene says, make an eye. And then the information is present. But we have no ancestral history with insects. It isn't the tree of life, it's the bush of life. If you look at the Cambrian explosion of life, arthropods and our chordata appear simultaneous, and before that there's like a common ancestor. So the common ancestor seems to, and it's for limbs is the same fact. The machine says, the gene says turn on a limb. That for some reason this information has to be present before because you can't get it twice. That's what Richard Dawkins had to back down. The iris gene has 130 mapping points on it. You can't get that by chance twice. So it had to be present before this bifurcation where insects went that way and chordata, our phylum, went this way. It had to be present in a common ancestor. In other words, it isn't by chance that the insects have the same gene, you know, by random reaction, because you can't get that twice. It's like it's 20 to the 130th, which comes out to mean more particles that there are in the entire universe, let alone on the Earth. More particles in the entire universe. I don't mean grains of sand. I mean protons, neutrons, muons. So you can't get it by chance twice. So it had to be present originally. Why? For what? You know, what was it there for? The same for the gene. I don't know how far back the gene, this gene goes back, but it looks like there's a lot of information. Well, physics tells us point blank, as far as physics goes, there's no question. You could be the most avid skeptic in the world, and you will be told it looks like the universe knew we were coming. That is, the laws of nature are made for sustaining life. They're not made for starting life. We have no idea what you need to start life. But you can be the most avid skeptic in the world. So if the laws of nature are like front-end loaded for life, the argument about it, but you realize what the argument about against this is, against it being a divine tunic, is that there are multiple universes. Now I don't know if I misplaced some of my slides, but there were these things, but it's worth saying that the most widely read science journal in the world, not peer-reviewed, you can guarantee that, describes, and I'm almost certain I don't have it, describes how the world is put together for life. If I have just bumping through here, and it's Scientific American, and in Scientific American they talk about. No, I guess I don't have it. Okay, Syllabi. Oh yeah, here it is. Scientific American. It's a decade ago, but it's the same argument. Infinite. This is the most widely read science journal in the world. It's not peer-reviewed by a factor of 10 easily over any other journal. It's just everywhere. People read it, and they more or less believe it. I don't know why. Scientific American. Infinite Earths and parallel universes really exist. Infinite Earths and parallel universes really exist. Now, how do we know they really exist? Now, what it means is parallel universes. If you have a lot of different universes, not just galaxies and stars, universes. So each universe will have its own law of nature, its own laws of nature, right? And they'll all be different. And you roll the dice enough, one of them's going to be a winner. Obviously, you're the winner, because the losers don't have no life whatsoever. So as long as you have, that's the argument. Here's the argument that proves that they really exist. Here's the evidence. Evidence in 4 colors, you should know. Cosmologists infer, notice the backpedaling, really exist. Cosmologists infer. You have to, the wording is, it's depressing actually, because there's such a desire to make the world materialist when even physics says it's not a material world any longer. Cosmologists infer the presence of level 2 parallel universes, that's each universe with its own law of nature, zooming along, and you roll the dice enough and you get one universe out of these gazillion universes that have the right laws of nature. Cosmologists infer the presence of level 2 parallel universes by scrutinizing the properties of our universe. These properties, including, and then they list the laws of nature, and they plot the major ones, show where they come together at one point, which is the only point where they all would work together, by scrutinizing the properties of our universe. These properties of the laws of nature were established by random processes during the birth of our universe. Yet they have exactly the values that sustain life. That suggests the existence of other universes with other values that don't sustain life. Really? The fact that our universe is it's almost embarrassing to read it as a scientist. The fact that our universe is perfect for life suggests other universes that aren't perfect for life? How? Because that's the statement of random again. These laws of nature were established by random processes during the birth of our universe. Really? How do we know they were random? We have no idea. But the simple, that is how the data are presented in the most widely read science journal in the world. There's no data, there are no data whatsoever that support other universes being present, except the fact that our universe is perfect for life. So it's kind of like the universe is preloaded. In fact, Brian Carr, the noted astronomer from Imperial College in London, says, if you don't want God, you better have parallel universes. And he's, as I understand, he's a secular person. If you don't want God, you better have parallel universes, because they're the only way of getting around the fact that our universe is tuned for life. And this idea, like no sound and no sound and no, we're looking for some, like you said, the universe, his whole idea is to looking for something metaphysical where this thing called the mind might be couched, might be housed, and you're not going to find it in the physical world. You have to find it in what would be the metaphysical world. And the argument against the idea of a mind-brain duality, that is, the mind would not be part of the brain, but would be part of our life, would be that, well, why would you have a dualism? And the amazing arguments that are used by this, by the scientists that want a material world, is, where would you have any basis for dualism? Well, the entire world is dualistic. We have this idea of wave and particle, matter and energy, but wave and particle is a major duality. The entire world is wave-like, the entire world is particle-like. But waves go forever, and particles are ping-pong balls with discrete ends. So how can it be both wave and particle simultaneously? Well, it can't be in human logic, but it is in physics, or every piece of high tech, including that stuff taking the picture, would stop working instantly. So, and yet there's no understanding for it. There's no understanding for how the radiation is emitted that lets your shirt come out looking, what is it, maroon? Something, and your shirt come out looking green. We have no idea. An electron jumps from one level to another, so it has to give off energy. So the energy is, it invents a particle called a photon, a particle of light. That is the energy, and you never see the photon, you never see the electron, right? Atoms have a nucleus and the wings of electrons. And what makes all of these light waves and all the colors are different waves when an electron jumps from here to here. And the difference is a certain level of energy, and it gives off a wavelength of like 700 nanometers long, so that's going to look like red. If it's 400 nanometers, it's going to look like blue. And the different wavelengths, they're all traveling at the speed of light. But the problem is, for it to give off a particle called a photon of light with that wavelength, It cannot gradually give it off because then it'd be a smear. That was the whole problem. That was the beginning by Planck of discovering the quantum. It's not that the electron gradually drops from here to even fast from here to here. The electron disappears here, enters a realm outside our physical world, reappears here with a lower energy, and that energy produces the photon. It is never seen in between, because it never is in between, because if it were in between, it couldn't give up the photon of that specific energy. You know, the difference in this wavelength, this energy level to this. It's never there. So the idea of looking for a dualistic idea, the idea of a mind being separate from the body, is completely incoherence with the understanding of how the world is put together. And with this mind being separate, that solves a lot of problems, thought, free thought, etc. But all these arguments in which people will tell you that, you know, we have this thought, if we have our own thoughts because we all want to have our own will. The simple fact is, from the material world, there is no place for choice, free will. We're all programmed in the material world. You either have a deterministic world, like Isaac Newton's world, where the laws of nature are fixed. You know, the famous gravity, forces, F equals force equals mass times acceleration, you know, all these basic laws. That's Isaac Newton. That would be a deterministic world. The deterministic world means that the laws of nature determine the world. When your brain is made up of the laws of chemistry and biology, and it's governed by the laws of nature. So from a deterministic world of Isaac Newton, there is no place for free will, because which neuron is about to fire to give you another thought is already fixed by the moment before, by the chemistry. If you could measure, in fact, that's exactly what the famous de Laplace statement in 1814, where he said that if you could measure, he said we can't, but if you could measure every aspect of the universe right now, everything, the position of every particle in the world, obviously we can't, but there are particles out there, we just can't, we're just limiting what we can do. But if you could, and if you could put them into a giant thinking machine, we call that a computer today, a supercomputer, you could program that with the laws of nature and know the past and the future. The past and the future determined by the present. And that's true in a deterministic world. Because the chemistry, if there are laws of nature, that's what they're called, laws of nature. They control the chemistry. And then comes the early 1900s, almost exactly 100 years after de Laplace's famous statement on determinism. And it comes Planck and a few others where we enter the quantum world, and the world of quantum physics is not deterministic. That's what's so strange. It's probabilistic. We determine that, in fact, you can't predict the future or the past because there is no exact something to measure. It's a fuzzy world. That's the nature of a wave. It's a lot here, but it's a little bit over here. Well, where is it? Well, it's over it, but you know, so it's fuzzy. So it becomes a probabilistic world. You could say, well, that's just great. Now it opens the door for free will, because now if it's probabilistic, it's not no good either. You got all this information in your subconscious. What bubbles to the conscious is now no longer determined by the chemistry of your brain, instant chemistry, because it's not deterministic. It's probabilistic. So it's the same problem. So now you still don't have free will. In other words, the thought that it really makes you think that's the case, because anyone that davens knows really well how hard it is to keep your mind on the topic. That is true, isn't it? I think that's one way you can know about a false navi, a false prophet. He will guarantee he can keep you from your mind wandering while you're praying. That you know he's a false prophet right off the bat, okay? I mean, everyone knows it. How many times you daven mincha twice? Because you can't remember. If you're not with the minyan, you're on the road. How many you daven twice? You can't even remember. You think you're talking to God. You can't even remember if you daven. Anyway, so the problem, so what happens, the difficulty comes down to that there's no place for free in the physical world. And that's the truth. They're correct. There is no place for free will in the physical world. Either it's deterministic, which we now know it's not, or it's probabilistic. Probabilistic is equally lousy. You have a window of choice in your subconscious, and the thought that bubbles up to the surface while you're trying to daven, that for sure you don't think, but even right now that I got off on this tangent, it would be, I would not have known at the beginning that I was getting on this tangent of free will, because I'm already at the age of the universe, but you have this window, and which piece of information within a narrow part of that window is going to bubble up to the surface is completely not determined by the moment before you make that thought. Because it's a probabilistic concept of what's going to come up. So the difficulty becomes, so do we have choice or not? And that is why all the neurologists with whom I've spoken, from a material point of view, say there's no place in the physical world for free will. But I think we have free will. I'm just going to wrap this up and what is the piece of information that lets you have it? We didn't do this last time, right? I think I figure I'd get to something different. This. I finally put this together, about 50 pages of what may never be a book, but it's a booklet. We do science in a very special way. It's called inductive reasoning. I have something solid here and I drop it and it goes down. I have some liquid, it pours down. I drop a feather, it goes down. Wow, gravity. I take a measurement of many different phenomena and they all do the same thing. They all fall down. Mass attracts mass. Wow, I've discovered gravity. Okay, so that's how inductive reasoning. I just think it was deductive, but it happens to be inductive, at least according to Webster's dictionary. Okay, so that's how we do science. So now I'm going to take to neurology. No data by me, I'm not a neurologist, I just take the data of the neurologists that every one of them says we don't have free will. That's Rebecca Sachs at MIT, that's Olaf Blank in Scandinavia, that's, well, Mike Schwirmer's a writer, but says also, and Oliver Sacks, who's going to give us a few or four other persons as well. Okay, these are all the naysayers. All the naysayers that say we do not have free will, and it's across the board essentially in neurology. There's no place for free will in neurology. But I look at the data and I discover something interesting. Well, I'll back up before they do open brain surgery. I get up in the middle of the night, it's pitch black, I'm fast asleep, and the baby starts crying in the other room. I jump out of bed, run to get to the baby while she's crying, the door was shut, bang, I hit my head into the door, and what do I see? Stars, yeah. Because what happens, the bang activates these nerves here in my retina, and these retinas, being good soldiers, say when I get activated, these nerves say, I send the information back to my visual cortex, and it's light. Okay, but there's no light, but that's what happens. But also you can do the same with God forbid, open brain surgery, okay? So open brain surgery, the person's awake because you don't feel any of this stuff, and you touch a spot over here, and he says, wow, what's this green light in the room? You touch it, what's this red? The room is turning all red. In other words, you can touch a part of the brain in a pitch black room, this is open brain now, in the visual cortex, and stimulate a sensation of light. But I also know that there are light waves out here that when they strike this part of my body called my eye in the retina, they induce the sensation I call light. These waves, which are not light, but when they touch me. And then I do another experiment. I touch the part of the brain over here, in the auditory part of the brain. And I hear sound. What a racket. Come on, cut it out, Doc. Stop all the noise. But there's no sound in the room. But I know also out in this world here, there are molecules that move. They bang together, and they bang together over here, because that's what brings sound to you. Molecules banging, hit this part of the ear, and they move, etc. Waves, motion, bones, fibers moving, signals, sound. So I realized something interesting. Where I touch the part of the brain here, I can induce a phenomena that actually exists outside, namely the light waves. The brain seems to be tuned for picking up things that really exist. I touch over here, I get sound, I hear sound, but the molecules are really out there. So somehow the brain is this amazing antenna that is designed to pick up things that exist outside. And then I touch a part of the brain over here and say, honey, you got to cut out that garlic. I mean, really, Doc, you could have brushed your teeth before you cut me open. That garlic smell is really bad. But I know also there's something called garlic out here that gives off molecules that gets into part of my nose. There's a nerve tip here that picks up the garlic smell. It's amazing. Every place that I touch in the brain that induces a sensation, I can map it to something that takes place that really exists outside the world. Because that's the way the brain is made. The brain is an antenna or an interpreter for information coming in, whether it's touch, whether it's sound, whether it's smell, whatever it is, sight, to detect what actually exists out in the world. And then Olaf Blank and a few of these others that talk about this say that if I touch a part of the brain right over here, which would be where these two fingers might meet, approximately here, inside my brain, when I touch that part of the brain, I get the sensation of me outside my body. I get myself the sensation of to use Mike Schwimmer, Jewish needless to say, founder of the Skeptic Society, who thinks anything metaphysical is the stupidest thing you've ever coming down this track, although he backs down on it a bit now. You get, in his words, the phantom self. Every place that I touch on my brain, I measure something that actually exists outside, whether it's light, whether it's sound, whether it's smell, whether it's touch. The brain doesn't play tricks. And now I touch a part over here, and I get a part of I get the sensation of me outside my body. This is peer-reviewed data. It's not nice here. Well, what could it possibly be? The difficulty knowing what that is I can measure molecules moving, and I can tell that they make sound. I can measure light waves with a machine, and I can tell that they induce light. I can measure molecules coming from garlic, and I can also see that they break. The brain is wired to test reality. The way, see, this is probably the mind. The difficulty in analyzing the mind is there's no machine that can pick up the mind except your brain. We have lots of machines that pick up molecules from garlic, lots of machines that pick up light waves coming in, lots of machines that pick up molecules moving for sound. There's no sound, there's no machine for the mind. But that's probably the mind. So the argument against it, which comes out to be, is an argument that boggles the imagination because it's presented to get around this fact that it might be the mind. The neurologists say, oh, it's a hallucination. We're talking about healthy brains here, really. These are healthy brains we're talking about, not sick brains. The idea that a healthy brain would have a section in it for hallucinations is almost ludicrous. The brain is very, very strongly wired to be aggressive. So as these same scientists that I mentioned before, the Sachs, etc., talk about, if God forbid, let's say a child is born with no eyes, or there might be, God forbid, an accident, the person loses eyes, but the visual cortex is still intact, and it's made to pick up the information coming from here. Within a few years, that visual cortex doesn't atrophy. Not, absolutely not. The brain isn't that stupid. The brain takes it over for language. The brain is aggressive. The brain does not waste space. If you lose a phenomenon, talk to anyone who's lost a limb, and they can still feel the limb. But eventually that part of the brain will be taken, it's called the phantom limb. It will be taken over by something else. So the likelihood that this phantom body that you have when you touch, every human being has it. Every human being has it. That you touch this part of the brain and you get it outside your body, that it's a hallucination is practically ridiculous. The brain wouldn't keep hallucinations because a healthy brain that has hallucinations is no longer healthy because hallucinations kill you. You wake up in the middle of the night, in the jungle, there's a lion or a leopard about to leap on me. Oh no, it's just my imagination. Next night you wake up, I hear that noise, it's a leopard. That's my hallucination. It's a hallucination. By the sixth time, you stop paying attention to the hallucination, and by the seventh time, you suffer for the leopard. Hallucinations kill you. Healthy brains don't have it. The likelihood that phantom self is a hallucination is so, in my opinion, so stupid that to think that a healthy brain would have it, that it's embarrassing that it's presented. That hallucination, that's phantom self, and it's by the naysayers. It's not by the yes-sayers. The naysayers all bring down the idea that you touch here and here, and you know what you get? You get a vision, a feeling of you outside your body. And that's pretty amazing. Because every other place you touch in the brain, by induction, if you touch it here, it did something, so that phenomena must exist out there. And lo and behold, it does. And that phenomena must exist, and it does. Every place, every induced phenomenon in the brain, except for the phantom self, can be matched by something physical outside your body. The phantom self can't be because it is totally metaphysical. And the phantom self would be the mind, and the mind is not bound. The mind does two things. The mind is not bound by the physical body, which means when the brain dies, the mind doesn't. So that breaks it free. It's not shackled. But more important than that, the mind is not important, but it's pretty important because it's death. In that case, death, what we call death, would be the end, would merely mark the end of the body's participation in life. Death, as we call what death is, would mark the end of the body's participation in an ongoing life, which would be the unembodied consciousness of your mind. So, I just wanted, once I get your thing, but I guess I lost my thought. just the other part. So that would then be your mind. The mind would not be bound by either determinism or quantum probability, because the mind isn't bound by the laws of nature. The mind is out. The mind, this phantom self, is not physical, so it's not bound by the physical laws. If that doesn't exist, then you don't have free will, because I can guarantee you there's no place for free will in your brain that's physical. But you have a part of you that's not physical, and science has discovered it. Science discovered it in this phantom self. They call it the phantom self, but the more logical name would be the mind. And that makes your choices. The mind can only work within the window of choice you've got in your brain. You feed in garbage in equals garbage out. Louis Pasteur wrote it perfectly. Chance favors the prepared mind. If you load your mind with garbage, as they say, garbage in was garbage out. But if you load it with Yusuf, the late Rosh Yeshiva HaTorah said it in a more, let's say, pithy way. He said, if you want to philosophize in the morning, don't orgy at night. Or conversely, if you orgy at night, don't expect to philosophize in the morning. Chance favors the prepared mind. But you had a hand up, right? Yeah. Did you have a hand up?
So what exactly is, like, what does one experience when they have this out-of-body experience?
Experience yourself. Exactly what you're experiencing right now with yourself.
I'm saying, like, when you are out of body, is it like I'm in that corner looking down at me? Like,
yeah.
I can act. So
Exactly the near-death experiences. It's exactly.
But I'm saying, like, do you have, because when I'm, like what you were saying, when I'm seeing light and I'm seeing pictures, because my eyes are receiving the data, my brain is interpreting it. So if I'm having an out-of-body experience so that I'm over there, but there's some, like, visual reception where I'm seeing pictures, even though I'm not in my brain, how does that work? Because it doesn't seem like your mind is only equipped, or your brain is only equipped to take in information through your eyes. Out of body,
your brain is all the sensory organisms. So,
yeah. So, but when you're out of body, you don't have your brain. You're just whatever. If you want to posit that, it's just your mind. So how exactly can you see things out of body? Because you don't have a brain to interpret what you don't even have eyes to receive the data. If
you did not have eyes, your mind would not be seeing. You would not be aware of your mind. Whether your mind is seeing it or not, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But if your eyes, God forbid, if you shut your eyes, your brain is not getting a picture. If I close my eyes, I can't tell if you're raising your hand now or doing whatever you're doing. And my mind doesn't know that either. Mind takes the information that you've got inside here and then does with it what it thinks it should do.
So I'm just curious, based on what we're saying about the brain, that it only works based on just interpreting things that we're taking in. And it's equipped only to do things that, like, are necessary. So we have eyes to see things, so it interprets things based on, what it's taking in. So even though there isn't actually a color red, when I mess with the visual part of my brain, it looks as though I'm receiving red, because my brain has a part to receive red. It's just going in hyper mode. So only the things I see is only red. I'm curious how, when you are out of body, whatever that exactly means.
You mean your mind, which is always there. I mean, it's not like it's something you turn on and off.
Yeah, I know, but I'm curious how exactly is there, because you're saying that you actually see, like, everybody in this room. If I having an out-of-body experience, I would be on the ceiling and I could see everybody in the room. How exactly
No,
that's not what happens?
No, your mind is working with, your mind can only choose from the information inside your brain. But it's not bound by the laws of nature, which would say, well, now this part of your window of choice is going to act. It can make that decision.
I'm just curious, how can your brain make some image of that you would have a perspective from somewhere outside of where you are right now?
Oh, you can imagine it. You mean you can imagine looking at yourself from the top. The mind isn't doing that, though. The mind is getting information from your brain. I mean, I can imagine what you would look like approximately if I was up on the ceiling looking down at you, but that's not what the mind is doing. The mind isn't something that's floating around. The mind is it's not physical, so it's like this, it's inside and outside of you. It's because it's totally metaphysical, it's not, we can't define it, because it's the same story. Every thought that we have is couched in the box. What's the box? Time, space, and matter. No one thinks out of the box. Where's that? Where?
It's the only way to know how to experience it. You can more than that. He's saying, but he's saying that's the only system.
No one thinks outside the box of time, space, and matter or energy. So I mean, so we say this mind is not of any of those things. So you can't really picture. You can't picture what this mind is because there's nothing to picture. It's well, because I can relate this very interestingly to the creation of the universe also. This idea, but so. You know, it's not like your mind is over here looking at you. Your mind is inside you and out. You know, it's, how do you say it? It's not physical.
So I know, like, but what I'm saying is that you can see like everything in your plane of vision in the color red when somebody messes with your visual part of your brain.
Yeah.
Because your mind already knows what red is in terms of like the light wave. But I don't get how your mind can see you or everything from a different perspective.
I don't think it is.
You don't think it? Okay.
I don't think it is seeing you from a different perspective. It's seeing you. You can imagine. Certainly, you can imagine what it would look. You can imagine yourself right now, what it would look like if you were sitting behind you and looking at you from the back. Right? I mean, it's hard, but you can imagine. I mean, I can imagine what it looks like if if the Aaron Kodesh. I'd like to stay with my back to it, but like looking at me, probably is.
So just to clarify, when an out-of-body experience doesn't necessarily mean that you actually are looking at everything else just from from out of body.
No, but, well, the near-death experiences would be that now the brain has essentially shut itself down, and now that mind is no longer tightly linked to your body. So then the near-death experiences I've talked a bunch of before people get an email from time to time about persons that have had them. It is usually the something of you looking down on your body like an old overcoat you don't really want to get back into. That's the descriptions that I've gotten from people. But that's different because then that mind is no longer shackled to your body. You see that with if you see that the hint of that in the Bible is Abraham. I mean, the example would be Abraham is gathered to his people, but it's most clear, I think, with Jacob. Jacob dies, is gathered to his people, is embalmed, and then is buried about 2 months later. So the sequence is out of sequence. If gathered to the people, stick him in the cave in Hebron. All the deaths that are described exactly that way. It's always die, gathered to his people, and then sometime after that, buried. So what's this gathered to the people? It's exactly, if you talk to people who had near-death experiences, and I'm not using this as a proof, but it is interesting that it's always that experience, that they're always gathered to the people. They see, the 4 that I've interviewed at any depth that have had it all said the same thing. They met their deceased parents, their deceased spouses, their deceased friends. That could be what they gathered to as people. The Jacob experience, I say, was like is an NE near-death, or is it NDE near-death experience without the N. It was a death experience. You know what I mean? Wait, the woman in the back had it in the green shirt. You had your hand up?
Yeah, so now I understand because you differentiated a near-death experience from a phantom self. So phantom self just literally means you're imagining what you are based on the information you have.
Well, no, it's not imagining. That's you're imaging what you are without the I am. The imaging that it really exists. That's part of you. But your brain is probably, if this is true, it's only a thesis I'm developing. I'm not saying the phantom self is science. All the touchings are science. The only thing I'm developing is I'm taking that piece of science and saying that this is in fact why we have free will, that we have choice, because it doesn't override nature. Nothing overrides nature. It bypasses nature by being outside of nature. The mind is not part of the physical world, so it's not bound by the laws of nature. So it can choose. And this idea that comes into the press now, where what's his name? Oh, come on, Benjamin Libet, Libet, I guess you pronounce it, or if you're not French, Libet. But in any event, where he did these studies on blood flow, and he found that your brain, he tells you to put, the experiment was, anytime in the next few minutes when you want to press a button, and it records exactly. And he has an fMRI, an imaging of your brain going on. And it always, the brain would activate about a third of a second. You know, it's hard to see that it's such a small amount, about a third of a second before you become aware that you want to push the button, your brain fires up, push the button. Now, that's his experiment. But that would be the difference between getting ready to do something and then doing it. Okay? Now, your mind may work in that interval or not, but the key is that the mind has to be outside your brain. The idea that your subconscious would fire up before your conscious, anyone that knows anything about the brain, even just reading secondary, tertiary literature, knows that your subconscious runs your life. Totally. I mean, that's why you start daydreaming in the middle of davening. You think you got God's ear, and the next thing in the morning, but you're going to catch the bus or not. Wait, these guys have their hands up also. Yeah.
I might be completely misunderstanding the concepts, but if we have a probabilistic paradigm for how can we make such positive statements about the past based off present data?
You can't. That's the whole point. That was a mistake of in 1814, the theory of determinism. The mistake was that you could predict the past, you could reconstruct the past to predict the present from the future. You can't, because it's not a deterministic world.
So
it's a probabilistic world.
Am I correct in saying that science continues to make those statements, though?
What?
Am I correct in saying that science seems to be
No. Science has now taken the probabilistic approach that the reason that you can't predict the past, predict the future, or reconstruct the past and the present is because the present is fuzzy and the past was fuzzy also. So you can't measure exactly what you can't measure all as Delaplace said in his article. If you could measure every nick and cranny, every particle in the universe, from the smallest to the largest, he said you could predict the motions of the largest galaxy and the smallest atom. And in a deterministic world, that would be true, because everything is run by the laws of nature. But it's not true. Torah never had that problem, but you should realize that's why the second sentence. What's the first sentence you say after the Borach? I presume from you daven in the morning. Am I right? So you say Borach, and let's say you're awake. So you say Borach, and then you say a sentence. Blessed, yeah, what? You know what it is tomorrow? What? You say or. Yeah. It's easy when you're davening, right? It comes right out every single problem. So I'm asking you to say it. Yeah. Why is that the first sentence you made? It's the opening sentence of the place where you got the beginning, you're going ahead. Why should that be the first? Because it tells you how God runs the world from a spiritual point of view. It's the origin of Tzimtzum. Form like Yotzeh or Vrei Choshech. Yotzeh, it's Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7. Yotzeh or Vrei, Oseh Shalom or Vrei Ra. We say Hakol, in the Mishnah in Berachot it says, it's too bad to think about Ra, evilness in the morning, so we say Hakol. Yotzeh or Vrei Choshech, you form light, or creates darkness, makes peace, creates evil. That's interesting. Yotzeh or Vrei Choshech. So if that creation is the pulling back of light, Yotzeh or God forms light and creates darkness, makes peace and creates evil. Okay? Well, just taking the simple meaning, that's the first sentence you say. It's the first sentence we say that it's trying to get a point across how God runs the world. That God gives us a slack. Yotzeh or creates, or makes peace and creates evil, or Yotzeh or forms light and creates darkness. Well, wait a minute. If you're the source of the spiritual light, how do you get darkness? What do you have to do with some of the light? Nope. It's not a rhetorical question. If you're the source of spiritual light and you want to get a little bit of spiritual darkness in the world, what do you got to do with the spiritual light? Right, yeah, tzimtzum. Let's attempt to pull back. I think I'm not a real Bucky in this, so I'm giving like just my understanding. That's the origin of tzimtzum. The basic understanding of God. The first sentence that we make is this idea of tzimtzum, that God contracts and gives you the opportunity not having to forms light and creates darkness. What do? You pull back some of the spiritual light and you get spiritual darkness. Makes peace and creates evil. One of God's names is peace, shalom, shalemu. And you want evil in the world, you pull back some of the peace. The first statement is we have tzimtzum. So Torah never had an idea of a deterministic world spiritually. Okay? It always had this tzimtzum. You get it right. Okay, man's voice, woman's voice. What can you do? You got to be egalitarian here, and I hope of that. My wife would be proud of me.
Not Torah, not looking at the world in a deterministic fashion. How does that dovetail with biblical codes, or does it not?
Biblical codes? I don't teach codes. My background in statistics, even though I had many, many years at MIT, is about 1/2 of a page of study, and it's totally statistics. In the parsha that we read last week, that was the parsha when we also read that week 19 years ago when Rabin was murdered. In the parsha, it's chapter 17, verse 15, or it's 15:17 or 17:15. I don't recall. It's one of those two. Because the Torah is given ratsuf, right, with no breaks between the words. And if you break up the words into different breaks, it says Eish, Ra, Barabin, exactly spelled out. Fire, evil fire on Rabin. We read it in the morning. He was murdered at night. I have no idea if it has any significance, but it's in the portion. We read it just what's today? What day is it? Hey, Sunday? Yesterday. We read it yesterday. I'm not saying codes, and I don't teach codes, but it is interesting. It is the only place in the entire Torah that sequence shows up. We read it in the morning, and he was murdered at night. Does that mean the codes are true? I don't teach them. I have no take on them. They're really smart people that say they are valid, and they're equally smart people that say they're not valid. And the difficulty is everyone has huge baggage on this. You know, huge emotional baggage. Either it's true or no. Look, God, it could be. I don't teach. I know Aish does teach it, and I teach it at HaTorah, but I don't teach codes because I say you have to look at both sides.
But the question still stands: what is determined? Is anything?
Oh, okay, that's different. To accident.
Right.
What is determined? That's different. I think. But you know, you guys, your Robert in here may think differently. That God guarantees two things. God guarantees that the people of Israel are going to be around because we are the marker in this world. We're the marker that God is active in this world. I'll get back to a moment maybe because then you're going to get. I just want to do a bit more because getting like marker in the world and that eventually will come back to the land. Now we went through 2 temples in Jerusalem already. Okay, so we can have all the midrashim we want, that there'll only be 3, but there are no guarantees on that. It's only that we will eventually come back to the land. As they say, we messed up twice already, you know. So that's, but that's one of the guarantees that we exist. God chose us as the marker, for better or for worse. For the latter part of for worse, just look at Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 26, 27, and 28. Deuteronomy chapter 32 is 1.5 chapters before the end of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. It's in verse number 26, 27, 28. God says, point blank, you are such schlemiels, such nudniks, such crumbuns, that I would have wiped you off, I would have erased your memory from the world. This is God speaking to us at the end of the Bible. I would have erased your memory. You're such lousy people. I would have erased you from the world, but I couldn't do it. Because the nations of the world would say that it was by their hand that it happened, and it wasn't me orchestrating this destruction. Well, why does God care about the nations, what they're going to say? If God doesn't like us, God forbid, what's the problem? What the problem is? As David Hartman said, God fell in love with Abraham. God fell in love with Abraham and got stuck with his grandchildren. God has chosen us as the marker. They are wonderful Jews, but then there's also Madoffs in the world as well, right? Bernie Madoff, who ruined hundreds of thousands of people's lives. So they're not such nice Jews in the world as well. But we are here as a marker. And God says it point blank. I would have, but I can't do it. What do you mean you can't do it? God can do it. No, because the nations of the world will say, I'm not running the show. So God runs the show, but gives us a tremendous amount of freedom. Therefore, He could actually say, you're such crumbuns. I'd have. It's very enlightening that bit of Deuteronomy there. It's really worth reading it 2 or 3 times next time you think about running a red light. When cheating on taxes. Well, that's different. Anyway, it's getting very late. Yeah. There's one thing I want to do about the creation of the world, because that's just the metaphysical aspect. Then that's the end. Okay. This is from last year. You guys all saw this, I'm sure, right? I don't know if we did this a bit. I'm not going to go to the age of the universe. Anyone who's interested in how 6 24-hour days, 24-hour days, 6 of them can be the age of the universe, I give you one of my cards. Go to my website. There are a bunch of articles there. One of them is the age of the universe. It leads you by the hand in 5 typed pages. You can download, just read it. What the science of God says in about 2 chapters. But what's interesting here, this is NASA. This is the condensed knowledge of the scientific community. It is a timeline. It's directly from the web. This piece of paper is about 5 or 6 years old. Hasn't changed one little bit. The words are all theirs. NASA, the National Space Authority. It's the condensed knowledge of the scientific community. It's a timeline. Creation. Universe expands. This is us out here today. Each line's a billion years. But I just want to talk about this, then we'll end it. This is the creation of the universe. The black is nothing. It's outside this box of the physical in which we all live. We all think, we all exist and think in the physical. But there's a metaphysical world out here. That would be also mine as well, but we just leave this for the creation. So this diagram is surrounded by black, which is not empty space. Empty space is not nothing. Empty space is space that's empty. That's inside here. But notice the creation of the universe. This is the combined knowledge. A year and a half ago, I presented this to the United States Congress and a few thousand other people at the National Prayer Breakfast. It's interesting. They were interested in what the Bible says about creation. Anyway, nothing. And then we have the creation of the universe. And even though these words are too small to read, it doesn't say G-O-D, right? It says quantum fluctuations. It says quantum fluctuations. Science tells us that an aspect of the laws of nature create the universe from nothing. This is nothing. This is not empty space, nothing. Now, if the law, and this is science. This is not, theology. This is science. If the laws of nature create the universe, and our understanding of time begins with the universe, does that mean that the laws of nature predate the existence of the universe? If the laws of nature create the universe from absolute nothing, does that mean the laws of nature predate the universe? It's not a trick question. The answer is obvious.
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Yes, obviously. Yeah. Or no. So now we have the laws of nature creating the universe from absolute nothing. Are the laws of nature physical, or are they forces that act on the physical?
Forces that act.
So, and the laws of nature predate our understanding of time. So it's hard with the language saying predate time, but that's what we're stuck with language. So you've got a set of forces, or a force, that predates, that's outside of time, that creates the universe from absolute nothing. That's not physical. That should start to sound familiar. A non-physical force that is not bound by time creates the universe from absolute nothing. Gosh, what does it sound like? Huh? Yeah. And the secular scientists who say, if you want to call that God, call it God. You notice that's the exact definition of the biblical God. Not bound by time, not physical, creates the universe from absolute nothing. God would use the laws of nature. God uses the laws of nature consistently to, when nature's around and can do the job, God uses those. I don't take divergence into that at the moment. So the God using the laws of nature to create the universe makes sense. If you create the laws of nature, you might as well use them. So we have this force that's not physical, that creates the universe, that's outside of time, creates the universe from nothing. That is 80%, between 50% and 80% of the biblical God. And again, it's the God of the secular, it's a deist God. Creates the universe and then steps back. And skeptics will say, call it God. But would it be a God that's interested? That's the other half. So the cup is not half empty, it's half full. We got this much of God. Now the only half that's missing is that which created the universe, interested in the universe it made. And for that you just look around the world and you decide whether or not Moses says the way you figure it out is Zechor Yemot Olam Bino Chino Over Dor. Chapter 32 again, verse 7. Zechor Yemot Olam, remember the days of old, or remember the days of old, and that's the 6 days of Genesis that changed light beams into life. If you think that can happen by chance, then you don't need a God. You got the God here already. If you think that, then the other, that's Zechor Yemot Olam. Remember the days of old, the 6 days of Genesis, the Ramban says, from the creation to here. Did that happen by chance, that light beings became alive? What does a light being have the chutzpah to feel love, excitement? But that's what this diagram says, because this is the only physical creation, according to all science today, and it ends up being people over here. Light beings became alive. That's what science accepts. But if that doesn't affect you, then the other half is Bino Chino Door for Door. Chapter 32, verse 7 is, we look at the flow of social history. Does social history, does the flow of humanity make sense? And we're the marker on that. Even the skeptics will say it doesn't make sense that every time you turn the page, it's the Jews, the Jews. You know, someone built a merpeset in the Shtakim, having a war. I mean, the level that Israel shows up in the news doesn't make sense. Jews is news. And that's what God predicted 3,000 years ago. We're the marker in this world. So the cup is half full even to the skeptic. Then the other half is, does he really believe that it's abnormal that Jews, and I've spoken to enough Nobel laureate scientists that say it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but God forbid we should be a God. Okay, we're really way over time. And one more question. Who's the last question? Matt or one?
Rock, paper, scissors.
What? This question was last?
Sorry, bad joke.
I get it. I didn't get it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. There is a little contradiction. The vegetation vegetables were created on the third day.
Formed. The word creation doesn't appear on the fourth. Be careful of the word creation. They appear. The word creation does not appear on day 3. The word creation is very specific in Genesis. So just say they appeared.
They appeared on the third day. Now, God had created the sun and all the stars on the 4th day.
No, the word creation doesn't appear on the 4th day.
I'm sorry?
The word creation, you have to be careful with the wording because it's significant. The word creation does not appear on the 4th day. If you read Rashi on the 4th day, they were already there. They became fixed in their positions. The word creation does not appear until day number 5. Until the first sentence number 1 and sentence number 21, day 5. The word creation doesn't appear on day 3 or day 4 or day 2. So, but they appear on the fourth day. They become fixed in their position. In the Genesis of the Big Bang, I talk with what Rashi talks about over this. They become, Rashi and also I think it's the Ramban as well, but I'm not sure. So it would be, how I would understand that to be, is that they were present, but you could not see them. We know that the view is from the bottom looking up, because it says because it says there are 2 great lights, right? The sun, the one for the day and the one for the night. It's clearly, of course, talking about the moon and the sun. Well, compared to the sun, the moon is no big deal.
And the Kochavim.
And the Kochavim, but they don't mention that it's big or small. But it does say the two great lights. Now, there's only one location in the world, in the universe, where the sun and the moon both appear as the same size. And where is that? From the earth. Because the diameter of the sun is 400 times greater than the diameter of the moon, but the moon is 400 times closer to the earth than the sun. So they appear actually the exact same size, but they're not the same size. So that tells you that the description that's taking place on day number 4 is from the ground looking up, from the earth looking up. Because there's no other way the Torah could have said they're both great lights, except from the fact this is the only location in the entire universe where the sun and the moon appear the same. So what happens is, as I understand it, that they become fixed and they become visible, in other words. So what we do know, I have enough geology background to talk about this. We do know the earth is formed hot and molten. All the primitive forms of life are thermophiles, that is heat lovers. But the earth is hot and therefore it has a huge vapor pressure. Now I've actually measured photosynthesis in ponds, actually in fish ponds, where there's a lot of gooks, there's a lot of green in the water. Pumping out oxygen, you could not see the sun. The overcast was so heavy, you didn't need a flashlight, it's plenty of light, but you could not see the often behind a cloud you can see the globe, not visible. The overcast is so heavy, photosynthesis is taking place just fine. If, in fact, this idea that these commentaries, that they become fixed in the position, means that they become visible, well, that did happen, actually, in that time period of the 4th day. The 3rd day, the earth would be so hot, high vapor.
No, not heat, light.
I understand.
Light?
Exactly. Let me finish. Listen to what I'm saying. the Earth would be so hot, not hot that it would kill life, but there'd be a high vapor pressure, so there'd be steam coming off the oceans, and so the Earth would be enveloped in this huge cloud. It would stop you seeing the sun, but it would not stop sunlight. The sunlight would come through diffuse. And we know geologically that in the time period that maps onto day number 4, the Earth had cooled enough so the cloud that surrounded the Earth condensed because it was cold. It was cold enough. I'm not talking about heat except for the cloud. It's light. So the sun.
No.
So
Was it a cosmic light?
I do not think so.
Or
Oh,
cosmic light? Or it's a sun's light or whatever star's light? So
I think
what's
it's the sun. Well, the light that.
or God's light?
No, I think it was totally the sun shining on the Earth, but the Earth was completely enveloped in cloud. Geologically that we know. And if you go to this, you can get from you just go Google images and type in NASA WMAP. But if you go to Google Images and type in NASA WMAP Schroeder, I actually made Google Images. It's pretty funny. I don't know how they got this one up there. In any event, what you do find is the same diagram, but with the colors mapping on when each day occurs, okay, in this time period. And day number 4 maps exactly onto the historic time of the Earth's development when the temperature had dropped enough so the clouds cleared. Because it was no longer like it wasn't a boiling ocean, but it was an ocean with enough steam to make it translucent. It then became transparent. Translucent being the light can come through, but you can't see the origin of the light. So I don't know. I don't like to say that that's absolutely the case, but it is intriguing that the Meforshim, not modern, I mean Rashi, etc., say that the sun was already there, just became fixed in its position. In other words, it was there by day 3. For the plants, because that was the basis of your question. As I understood, how do you have the plants on day 3 and not on day 4? And several things come out of that, by the way, as far as choice goes and as far as the plant. The Ramban says all the plants don't appear on day 3. It was the beginning of an ongoing act. The Torah just wraps it up on day 3, mentions all the types of plants. He says it was the beginning, says there's no specific time for this, it was the beginning of an ongoing act. I was just reviewing that. I would like to tell you the Hebrew, but I don't remember the Hebrew because I was reading just order to say it tonight. So the plants develop over time. That's the way the Torah handles systems. It wraps it up and puts it aside when it's not ongoing. But anyway, the plants. But there isn't something equally interesting on day number 3. God wants eitz pri oseh pri. It's verse number 11. God wants fruit trees that make fruit, but the earth doesn't do that. The earth makes eitz oseh pri, trees that make fruit. But God wanted eitz pri oseh pri. It's Rashi. If it was Schroeder with me, I wouldn't say it. Rashi says, God commanded the earth to bring forth eitz pri oseh pri, fruit trees that make fruit. It's redundant. That's verse number 11. Verse 12 is, the earth brings forth eitz oseh pri, trees that make fruit. But God didn't want trees that made fruit. God wanted fruit trees that made fruit. God wanted the tree to be a fruit also. This is Rashi, okay? And Rashi says the earth rebelled. Rashi says the earth rebelled. Now, if he told that to a quantum physicist, he said, yeah, well, we understand. Everything has an aspect of mind in it. Atoms, A-T-O-M-S, have an aspect of mind just like A-D-A-M-S. Atoms have a mind. It's just the way the world is put together. Cognizance is endemic, because that's the opening sentence of the Bible. The opening sentence of the Bible. Well, in any event, Rashi says the reason that the earth is cursed in chapter 3, verse 17, when Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit, each person is being chastised, and God then gets to Adam. God says the following: because you ate of the fruit I told you not to eat, cursed is the ground. What's cursed the ground for? Cursed is Adam. Eve gets hit on the head. The snake gets hit on the head. Adam gets away free. Cursed is the ground. It's a non sequitur. Because you ate of the fruit I told you not to eat, cursed is the ground. Rashi back in verse 11 says the reason that the ground is cursed in chapter 3, verse 17 is because the ground rebelled against God. The ground can rebel in chapter 1, verse 11 and 12. God wanted fruit trees that make fruit. But God didn't get that. There is a level of cognizance, and if it wasn't because of the Greek, he's going to end it right now. If it wasn't because there's an overload of information. if it wasn't because of the Greek influence, the Septuagint. It was done by Jews, it's true, but they had to make the Bible Greek friendly. The Torah, as the second Rashi will tell you, never said in the beginning God created the heavens and earth, with a beginning God, by a beginning, or upside down beginning, or inside out beginning. The word beginning was never part of the Torah. It is the Greek on our mind that every English translation you got up there on the shelves will stay on one form of the beginning. Beginning was never present, and if you have an art scroll, it's really embarrassing, because the art scroll brings the Rashi. They still say in the beginning of God's creating. Well, first of all, the creating is nowhere in the text. Beit Rish Aleph is not creating, it's created. Rashi brings this all down, and then he sends us to Proverb number 8. I learned this from the Rambam, from Nachmanides, and then I ended. I apologize, but because of the book of Esther, I feel I have to really give it in his name. Apologize, but I do. Also, that's an old book, great book. Bestseller list for the entire year. If I can find it, I think I remember where it is, but I'm not sure. Yeah. If you will merit, this is the Ramban in the English translation. It's not my English translation. It's the Chevelle. If you will merit and understand the secret of the first word of the Bible, Breshit, you will know why the Jerusalem translation, approximately 1900 years ago, is with wisdom God created the heavens and the earth. B'chokhmata. With wisdom God created the heavens and the earth, where the beginning was never there. Suddenly, when Rashi, who knew this stuff, tells us that the earth rebelled, that's no big deal. God used a substrate called wisdom to make the universe. That sentence isn't that God was wise to make the universe. It's that God used a substrate called wisdom to make the physical universe, and the physical universe starts over as energy, and the energy makes people sleep through lectures. That's what happened. So as bizarre it is that light beams become alive, it's just a little bit more bizarre that something totally ethereal, wisdom. Physics says exactly the same thing today. They just call it information. That is not two sides of the same coin. It's one coin and one side. Wisdom, information, idea. Heisenberg, Schrodinger, this is the list of the Nobel laureates, all say the same thing in their philosophical writings. That the essence of the universe is information. The essence of the universe is wisdom. So when Rashi tells us the rocks and water rebel because God has commanded the rocks and water to bring forth this stuff, these trees. Well, it had the ability to do it. But that's exactly what physics says today. That there is an Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, where Einstein was. There's an aspect of mind that exists in every atom. Well, just read Rashi. So that's not surprising, because suddenly we have this force that creates the universe that's outside of time, that's not physical, totally metaphysical. So the metaphysical is endemic in the world, if endemic is the right word. Anyway, it's really late, and we